cold, and it's interesting that you've just launched the We Lead Lounge. You want to talk a bit about the effort that you're trying to make the Indian delegation have more women and put women at the center of a lot of conversations here at WEF?
I think Prime Minister Modi's governance agenda had women at the center of it, because there was an understanding that if growth is fueled, it will ensure inclusion. And one of the greatest successes of his inclusive growth agenda has been the female component of our economy. It is, I think, a compliment to those who have made the lounge that we talk about the women who lead. But at the center of it are various government initiatives, be it the housing initiative where 4 crore homes have been built across the country, where the condition that the Prime Minister has put is that either a woman has to be the sole owner or a co-owner of the houses that are built by the government. Now, Rahul, it is not only a capital asset that is created, but research has conclusively proved that when women own property, domestic violence against them in their family units decreases. So there is an overarching impact of the growth story, which has inclusion at the center of it.
The gender parity report that came out had India at 127 in the global ranking, a little better than 135 where we were previously, but still really down.
We have actually highlighted to WEF even last year how it did not take into consideration many of firsts that have been seen by India with regards to women. For instance, we have 1.5 million women who are elected to office in our panchayats. In the political empowerment segment, when the gender gap index comes out, they do not consider those 1.5 million women who are elected to office as being, how do I say this, important enough to be recognized as political leaders. They do not take into consideration women who are elected to legislative assemblies. They do not take into consideration women who are ministers in state governments. They do not take women into consideration who are a part of the Council of Ministers in the government of India. So this huge gap is something that we had taken up with WEF. WEF was kind enough to say that yes, because it's a first only in India, and that is why there is a disbalanced view, and they will do this indeed in terms of reflection as to how to recognize this political potential that India has. In fact, now, in the wake of WEF 2023, we come here after the passage of the 33% reservation for women bill, which is again a first for any nation on this promenade.
How do you see that impact politics in India, elections in India, and in the manner in which tickets will have to be distributed by parties?
I think that given that BJP has been the first political organization in the country which has institutionalized reservation within the organization and has borne fruit for us by ensuring that more and more females in terms of leadership potential rise from the grassroots. We see it in our organization at the national level and at the grassroots level. But at the same time, what happens when women are in administrative and constitutional positions? This spend of the taxpayers' money is then directed to issues predominantly of education, health, building social infrastructure, ensuring livelihoods at the grassroots. So given what happens when women are politically empowered, and again, from an SDG perspective, women doing well, serving the cause of larger communities, I think it's a win-win, not only for women, but also men, children alike.
But you've seen in politics, one of the things that's often said is that women aren't electable, or you can't get them to win easily.
If there is one woman that you've been speaking to who became electable from one of the toughest political constituencies in the country, I think I humbly would like to submit that I'm point in case one of the examples that we become electable from some of the toughest demographies and political legacies of the country.
From the gender agenda, ma'am, I want to shift focus for a moment to the India agenda.
Yes.
And talk to you a bit about how the Indian government sees its position in WEF as we walk down the promenade. You've got the India Engagement Center right there. There is CII, Maharashtra, Telangana, Tamil Nadu. It almost seems like India was more than Davos.
I think that today when people look at the Indian experience, what do they see? in the wake of the pandemic, we did not hold supply chains hostage for geopolitical reasons. We helped not only provide pharmacological support to our countrymen, women and children, but we did so for the world. We innovated with a back to the wall, very frugally. Apart from that, our successes with regards to space technology, the depth of our digital engagement, not only financially, but also socially, I think gives the world much to wonder about, much to celebrate. If you look at the promenade today, one of the prominent agendas here is not only renewable energy, but also AI predominantly. The fact that India leads the AI alliance right now globally, I think brings a huge cause for the world to converge, especially towards India. Why? Because we are creating a consciousness and a conscientious use of AI. The Prime Minister speaks about AI not only from the perspective of how it helps, let's say, manufacturing, how it helps businesses, but how can we leverage our educational potential better with AI. But at the same time, be responsible enough to ensure that AI products are watermarked.
No, so
that
I want
you know
to come
source...
to that, because in the annual risks report that the World Economic Forum has come out with, the misuse of artificial intelligence in an election context is cited as the #1 global risk this year, and India is heading into elections. The Prime Minister has spoken about this publicly. How do you and the government see this?
The Prime Minister has articulated his position on deep fakes, and when he was addressing the alliance, he spoke about the need to generate watermarks for AI products. But apart from that, I think the Indian engagement with regards to digitization of government services has helped us also take away those elements within the beneficiary segments that were squeezing at the Indian treasury. But as a part of a larger false premise, the fact that in 10 years of Modi's government, we had close to 10 crore fake beneficiaries that and saved around 2.5 lakh crores of the Indian treasuries, I think that speaks volumes. Today, when you look at our voter engagement to the Election Commission of India, the fact that we have identification digitally now assured of our voters, so that booth capturing are things of the past, but the fact that our democracy has digitally delivered on services for beneficiaries, digitally delivered on democratic engagements between the Election Commission of India and the larger populace, that is to go to vote. And I think also the latest challenge that was thrown by the Election Commission for the naysayers, who in the shadow of a loss of an assembly election tend to blame the EVM. I think India has done much to make a solid case for how digitally our democracy has empowered our people.
Ma'am, you've been coming to the World Economic Forum for several years in different capacities. How do you see the buzz around the India story change or evolve in the years that you've been coming here?
Rahul, I think that one of the conversations that you had with Borge, and I'd seen a slice of it, there are two things that were a part of concern, especially in the risk report. One was that our global economies are getting more and more fragmented and fractured. If you look at the post-pandemic, let's say, health convergence of efforts, they have now settled to 2019 levels of engagement globally. However, India, and look at how India expands BRICS, look at what we do with regards to the African Union, with regards to the G20. We are now a very, very resolute voice from the global south. So we have globally, I think, ascertained a position for ourselves which says we work not only for the benefit of our citizens, but for the global good as well.
You know, there's a strong India presence at Davos. There's also a strong Saudi presence at Davos. And you were, ma'am, in Saudi Arabia recently, and I saw how in Pakistan everyone had a meltdown about the kind of position and respect that you'd been accorded. It seems the first non-Muslim person to be allowed in some of those areas in Makkah, Medina. What did you make of the kind of warmth between India and Saudi Arabia at this time, and the kind of reaction that we saw after that?
I think the Islamic world has shown much respect for Prime Minister Modi. And what you saw in terms of respect accorded to the Indian delegation was just a part of that engagement. But why did the Indian delegation go? The Prime Minister speaks about Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas and Sabka Prayas. Our intention is Hajj will start just when the elections will be at the anvil. Preparations then will become logistically a nightmare for many bureaucrats. Additionally, every year we have 1.2 million Indians who go for Umrah to Saudi Arabia. And there are logistical challenges which have to be met, diplomatic issues that need to be addressed. Apart from the fact that you want to ensure that while we are propagating that more and more women become parts of those delegations. If you look at our Hajj numbers, 47% of those who went in 2023 were women. So while we are trying to facilitate the travel of women, while we are trying to ensure the safety and security of our citizens by deploying CAPF personnel, and while for the first time Prime Minister has allowed us to leverage our ecosystem in the health ministry, I think it's a collaborative attempt between 6 ministries and 2 nations for the greater good of a population which is 200 million plus.
Much was also made on a different note of your bindi and your sari and the fact that you were in Mecca, Medina, and especially in Pakistan.
I didn't go to Mecca.
No, the fact that in Saudi Arabia...
I did have the privilege of speaking to the Deputy Governor of Mecca, who was kind enough to engage with us at the instruction of the Royal Court. But I think that we have come to a pass and a time in our humanity, in our democracy, where we can show respect for each other, irrespective of our religious belief, and actually adhere to our own religious norms while fulfilling our administrative or legislative duties.
Because Prime Minister Modi's opponents find that quite difficult to square. The fact that the UAE Sheikh came and there was a roadshow in Ahmedabad, lots of people lining both sides.
And a gentleman who rarely speaks.
Yeah, and coming out and being
very
part of the
warmly about
roadshow. What do you
India
make
and the
of
Prime
that?
Minister.
The kind of response we're getting from the Gulf Arab states.
I think that this is a compliment not only to the Prime Minister's diplomatic overtures, but most of the warmth and the relationship that he shares with global leaders. But to back it, I recall your interview with Borge, where he let slip, and maybe it's a Freudian slip or otherwise, that he looks forward to inviting Prime Minister Modi in 25. So there is an acceptance of continuity of government under Prime Minister Modi's leadership. What is also fascinating is that when you look at it from a WEF perspective, there is also a desire for investments to look at how much of your environment will be politically stable. So Prime Minister Modi today has become not just an individual, he's become a political ideology and in fact an economic movement, not only in India but also global south, or for that matter in many other platforms where we've seen geopolitics take some very interesting turns. What he's become symbolic of is patient reform. What he's become symbolic of is ensuring that reform helps percolate and creates more opportunities for people at large, financially or socially. So I just caught up on some news domestically about this lady from an Adivasi hamlet who was very proudly showing off to the Prime Minister the model structure of her entire village. When was the last time that a lady from a vulnerable tribe could speak to her Prime Minister? And in fact, her voice was so overwhelming. The Prime Minister just had this very gentle smile while he heard her elaborately. So I think the Modi magic is working not only in India, but globally.
So you spoke of the 2024 elections. You are sensing the inevitability of the BJP coming back.
Am I the only one sensing it?
The Rahul Gandhi, on the other hand, has just started this Bharat Nyay Yatra from Manipur to Maharashtra. How do you see the India alliance at this moment, and how do you rate their chances against the BJP?
I think that the fact that Adhir Ranjan Chowdhury was articulate enough to say that they cannot fight the Modi magic. I think the fact that Mr. Tharoor accepts that we will, in the BJP, be the single largest party. I think the fact that after the overwhelming defeat of the Congress party and the India Alliance in the recent assembly elections, the writing is on the wall. So while they march for dynasty, Modi marches ahead globally for prosperity for all.
Do you sense the prospects of a bigger victory, or do you think, given that there is 10 years of anti-incumbency now, or pro-incumbency, or 10 years of governance which will be
I'm not a political
judged?
pundit, Rahul. I'm just a simple Indian housewife. I can only say
That's
this.
hardly the case.
I'll only say, no. All it takes is a housewife with a mind of her own to go to Amethi and win an election. But I also feel that, like I said, Modi has gone beyond political tutelage or political analysis. He's genuinely become a movement and an ideology for people. And you've been a witness to it yourself as a journalist, people don't look at him from a perspective of an office. People don't look at him from a perspective of a political prism. They genuinely, for the lack of a better word, he's genuinely become a part of their families. And that's very difficult in India, to rip apart a family.
There is some talk.
So when Prime Minister says, "Mere parivar jano," he really means it, because that's the kind of love and that is the kind of support he sees in India.
There's some talk now of Priyanka Gandhi Vadra potentially contesting from UP, whether it's Rai Bareli or Amit.
No idea.
What do you make of the prospect of this potential
No idea.
clash?
I think that what is significant politically, and I say so this personally because I don't speak for my party on this, I'm not the official spokesperson on this issue, but what is interesting is that she has been bereft of any political responsibility in her organization after being responsible for Uttar Pradesh in the assembly elections. Now, when victory is definite, nobody shies away from a responsible position. The fact that they have been now devoid of that responsibility means that they will also be denied the blame for the, I think, momentous loss that awaits the Congress party.
So finally, what is Davos for you? Is it one meeting, or do you also get to go out? I mean, you've been out and about just for the interview. Do you get to see the sidelights as well, just a bit?
No, you don't get. When you're working for Modi, you don't get to do anything. You just have a work focus and nothing else, and then you pack your bags and go back home.
Really? Narayan Murthy said you have to work 70 hours. I'm sure your schedule will stretch much more
for
beyond.
somebody who works 18 hours a day, I can only supplement what Mr. Murthy says, but I do recognize that there is a segment in our populace which says that everything is not about pursuing work, but we are a country hungry for success. When the Prime Minister speaks of 2047 and what a developed nation as a national agenda means, well then, Mr. Murthy, more power to you.
Thank you very much, ma'am, for taking our time. We have a whole group of officials waiting for you. Lots of meetings, as you said, all work and no play, back to back. So we wish you all the best.
That's the Modi way.
Yeah, that's the Modi way. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you for the
ma'am.
conversation.
Thank you.